Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Robert, for your presentation tonight. Interesting. I've been to your office. I've been to your depot. I've been to your private offices in the Trigo depot, and last year, I noticed some Zephyr memorabilia and Zephyr pictures. I didn't really think much of it. But as you say, you've been kind of surreptitiously um, kind of preparing the Wisconsin Great Northern family without saying anything about what your grand plan was going to be. So, and now you're making it all happen. That's kind of interesting, Greg.
Yeah, we're having a really good time with it. We're excited to see the train parked out in our yard, and every day, people are already talking a lot about the progress that we've made in the short time it's been here. I mean, it's basically the train's only been here a month, and we're very near completion with putting all the windows, all new windows into it. Um, We've got nearly the entire ceiling stripped in the Becky Thatcher car already. Um, our guys have polished most of the stainless steel on the exterior. This next week we'll be ready to start putting in new head end power cable, transformers, circuit breaker panels, and we've got just arrived yesterday about half of the electric baseboard heat for the whole train. So huge changes are going to take place. And I was talking to one of my guys earlier today, and and right now we're in the midst of trying to finish this major track project that we started. And so about 80% of our people are working on the track project. And so everything that's being accomplished right now is being accomplished just by a couple of our folks working on the Zephyr. Here, as soon as the track project's done, everybody on the property from now until next May will be working on the Zephyr. And so we're going to be able to get this thing finished up in the next year, and by this time next year, y'all should be able to come up and take a ride on it.
That's awesome. You alluded to wanting to. We had talked about you joining us with the Night at the Museum program we did a couple months ago, but you had this in the back of your head that you wanted to save this as a big surprise. Now, back in the spring when we talked about doing a program, you said that you had something big coming up. You didn't say what it was, and this is quite big. Quite frankly, Greg. Earlier this summer, Canadian National mentioned that it was going to be jettisoning a bunch of its branch lines, lower density trackage in Wisconsin. And I thought for sure that your big news that you were going to announce to us today was going to be that you were taking over some branches. But no, it's totally different. And probably more of the potential to be profitable for you as well.
Well, we spent a lot of time over the years, surveying various railroad opportunities around the upper Midwest. I've looked at a lot of miles of railroad. The problem, and it pains me to say it, but the problem with much of that trackage in Wisconsin is that there's just plain too many miles of railroad and no traffic. Um, and I love the railroad business, and I love branch line railroading. I love short line railroading, but there just is not anything going on an awful lot of that. When you look at the railroad maps and what has been abandoned over the past few decades in Wisconsin, you understand why that happens and why it did happen. And unfortunately, a lot of this trackage today, there's just very little hope. And we think way outside the box at Wisconsin Great Northern. We take nothing off the table. I've had discussions with Canadian National about various possibilities. And there are things that the big railroads just plain don't like to do. And so when they want to take those kind of things off the table from the get-go, and passenger trains are one of them. I mean, who would have thought that you could build a successful operation like we have, starting out with a tourist train? Now, obviously, it required a level of commitment, beyond what a normal person would have. And thankfully, Mardell has been my partner, for 25 years. Robert kind of told you about our wedding. We were together 12 years before we even got married. But we've been partners from day one, and she's right there. She's one of the, probably one of the smartest railroad women that you're going to find in the Midwest. She understands the business and has been right here every day, helping me build it. And it's that level of commitment that's required. For many, many years, she worked as a full-time nurse, and that's what paid our bills at home. I spent up to 6 months a year away, doing consulting work in order to pay the bills, in order to keep this thing moving forward. I can tell you lots of stories about the sacrifice that was required to make it work. There were times back in the first few years where she would sell a ticket and turn around and hand me the $20 of ticket revenue she just took in, and I'd walk out the back door, go over to the gas station and fill a 5-gallon can or two worth of diesel fuel, drive around the back side of the train and pour it in so we could make the trip. I mean, that's how tight things were at times. She sold the tickets. I boarded the passengers. Once she closed up the ticket office, she came on board and conducted during the trip, sold souvenirs and sodas on the way back, and I was engineering. As soon as we got back to the station, she went back into the office to open up to sell tickets for the next trip, and I got the passengers off, cleaned up the train, and got ready for the next trip. It's that kind of crazy family commitment that was required to make it happen. Indeed. And a long-term vision.
Well, exactly. And you're coming up on your 25th anniversary, so it's obviously you're doing something right to have that kind of longevity. So I do know that we have some folks that have some questions. Brian Sykes, do you want to unmute? You mentioned you had a question.
I'm hoping you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, Greg. I met you many years ago, but I probably don't remember me. I'm from Cameron originally. You've done some very impressive things up there. I'm very impressed with what I've seen tonight. I haven't been up to see you for a while. I need to stop by and chat with you and say hi there sometime. But quite an operation. Very impressive. And you're doing some great things up there with the line that, the little bit of the line kind of nostalgic for me, where I grew up, just a little piece left operating up there. It's nice that you're doing that. But I had a question as far as the freight business. Do you go out and solicit, try to drum up, like what went on at Springbrook or even the Louisiana Pacific folks and so forth? Do you go out and solicit that, or do you just do they come to you and tell you what, that they'd like you to help them out? How does that work?
Well, a little bit of both, actually. And, we are working on some possibilities for the future, always looking for new business opportunities. But the thing that kind of makes us successful is that we don't, we're not kind of stuck in that one line of business. We have been very, very successful with the car storage side of our business, because we're ultimately a customer service organization. A lot of short lines, a lot of places that store freight cars, it's last car in, first car out. They won't switch cars. They won't go digging for cars when customers need them. Sometimes they have restrictive covenants. They won't take hazmat cars. They won't, take this particular type of car. And they won't, there's different parts of the year where they won't take cars and all this kind of stuff. And we have always been very open, very willing to service the customer's needs. I can think of many occasions where we have switched back 500, 600, 700 cars deep into the railroad to get out a car for a customer. And in very short periods of time sometimes, because they, had an uptick in business and need the cars back. It's things like that really have made us successful through time. As far as freight, we work very closely with Louisiana Pacific, Johnson Timber Products. Unfortunately, we took, quite a hit here this year with the closing of the Verso paper mill at Wisconsin Rapids. Everybody's got their fingers crossed that, there still may be a positive resolution to that, but that probably cost us 1,000 cars of pulpwood a year. Took most of our business out of our Springbrook yard. So we're looking at, some other opportunities, possibly some transload and things like that. But those things are very slow to develop. And a lot of that requires, significant infrastructure investments ahead of time. That was one of the things, we watched for years as Canadian National slowly pared back the pulpwood landings along our part of the railroad. Just one by one, they were closing them down. And we kind of, looked at that as an opportunity in the future. So an opportunity came up to buy some real estate. So we bought some property at Springbrook. The first year we just put in the turnout. The next year we extended it, maybe 200 feet of sidetrack. Then it was 800 feet of sidetrack. Another year later, we put in a second switch and a second sidetrack. And then lo and behold, they wanted to close the Stanberry siding, pulp landing. And all of a sudden there was the opportunity. We're standing there with a 2-track yard, 5 acres of flat property for the loggers. Literally just had to move down the road. So that was an opportunity for us. Now we'll look for another opportunity. If Verso is indeed done and does not come back, we've got a 2-track yard there with 5 acres of clear space. I don't know what we're going to fill it, but we'll fill it with something.
Very good. Well, thanks, Greg. Appreciate the insight.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hope you don't object to my question, but it sounds so exciting what you're doing. It really does. But I wonder if something like on the Mark Twain Zephyr, once you get that up and going, is that a train set that you would be willing or offer to other carriers to operate to make some more money that way, like bring it down to Milwaukee for some trips, or Chicago or whatever?
I guess I would say that we are building, in the process of rebuilding the train, we are building in that possibility. That was a big part of the choice of the new engine, going with the tried and true technology. Every railroader in the country understands the 567, the EMDs, so that, lots of people suggested, well, why don't you put in a gen set? Why don't you put in, all sorts of possibilities of modern, 2020 technology that could be utilized. And our position was that, that if the train were to ever go offline, and I hope the opportunity presents itself for that to happen in the future. Everybody knows that in most places, you can get parts availability is so strong for the 567 that, rather than it being a John Deere or a Cummins or a Cat or something like that, that the railroad doesn't have any mechanical people that understand that by sticking with the tried and true railroad technology that that it would increase the opportunity. You know, should we have a discussion, you know, with one of the major carriers about taking the train set offline, you know, the mechanical people are going to want to look at it. They're going to want to know what it is. They're going to walk up. They're going to walk on to the train and open up the door and go, oh yeah, we know this, and it's going to be fine. So that's you know, we're building that concept into our program going forward.
I just think that's just super amazing what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing.
Well, you're welcome.
How hard was it to get a replica chair and the fabric close to what the Denver Zephyr had for your new parlor car chairs that you're replacing, and the round end obs?
We have not done that yet. You know, we're focused at this point on rebuilding the train set, and you know, we're not locked into, you know, basically what I described to you is the floor plan arrangement, but we are not at this point locked into specific fabric, specific anything. You know, that's an ongoing part of the project, is finding out what is economically available. And I will tell you, you know, we are not a museum, and so, and there's plenty of folks who are going to take you know, a major exception to this, but we are not a museum. And you know, the secret to our success in the last 25 years is that we do not understand the word can't. I mean, it's a forbidden word on our property. You know, so often, and you know, be straight with you, I grew up in the museum environment. You know, I came from the museum part of this business, and so often, you know, the stories of the various preservation organizations, and God bless the work that they do, but so often we get hung up on, you know, the chair, the light fixture, you know, and I know plenty of examples of projects that are sitting waiting for the $5,000 a piece replica light fixtures because we can't put something else in. And that's not the way we operate. That's why we're able to accomplish so much as we do. We find something that is darn close, that 99.9% of the people who are going to come and enjoy our operation, they're going to walk in and go, wow, this is magnificent. It's not exactly the right fixture. It might not exactly be, you know, the right upholstery, but it still looks great, and it brings people out. And you know, after all, it requires people to make this thing work, and it requires revenue. It requires dollars coming into the till. That's the only way that this thing works. And for an operation, a small, I mean, truly small family operation like this, to tackle a project, if you go online and you read about the Mark Twain Zephyr, you know, they've been talking for, you know, 60 years about restoring this thing, you know, getting it rebuilt. And, you know, they've talked anywhere from, you know, $3 to $10 million, the cost. Well, I can tell you straight out, we're a small family company. I'm not a rich person. I came from basically nothing background, but we know how to do it. We know how to stretch the dollars. We know how to do these things. And so we're going to do it. And it's a passion. This is, you know, I view this as my legacy project. You know, not that the whole railroad, you know, isn't a great legacy, but this one I'm really excited about. You know, I've been looking at it for almost a decade. Every time I went to Gateway, I drove in and I saw that train parked there. And at first time it was like, I was shocked that it still existed. But then every time since then, you know, it's like, God, somebody really needs to do something with that. Boy, that would be a tragedy to lose that train. I mean, it made it this many years, and to lose it. So we finally decided that we had to, and it's kind of funny because, you know, we were looking at a number of projects, and my wife said, you know, she goes, I could really get behind that Zephyr project. And I'm like, well, we got a winner. Let's do it.
Awesome. Greg, just to recap again, how many years in service was the Mark Twain Zephyr?
23.
23. And then how many years laid up since then?
Let's see, out of service in 50 years, so 62.
Right. So more than 2/3 of its life was out of service, just laying around. And
Yep, exactly.
just waiting for you to look at it and kick the tires for 10 years and then decided this is a project that you and your family want to take on. And and I should also mention, I don't think you have, but your son Alexander, you're grooming him to follow in your footsteps. He's 10 years old now, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so he's going to be the next generation. So it's great to see him. He gave me a tour of his caboose when I was up there a few months ago, and that was a delight. He's a very enthusiastic young man. So that acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Any other questions for Greg or for Robert? There's got to be a couple more questions.
Hey, Mike, I had one thing to throw out too, if you don't mind.
Please.
Wanted to extend a special invite, something Greg and I kind of came up with, mostly Greg's idea, and we're kind of running with it. Is this is the first time we're mentioning it, so I guess kind of exclusive for you guys. Is we the 85th anniversary of the Mark Twain Zephyr is coming up in 23 days. Believe it or not. So, if Greg, do you want to give the details, or you want me to?
No, go ahead, Robert. You got her. You got her handled.
Okay, all right. We thought, we wrestled back and forth with, we're officially closed till May 1st of next year, and COVID and all that. But there was just something very special about the 85th anniversary coming up October 25th. It was October 25th, 1935, that the photos we showed you of Samuel Clemens surviving grandchildren who were there, and the daughter, and so we said let's do something, and we're gonna keep it informal. So if people would like to come up and see what they've seen tonight and see some of the history, we want to extend an invite. We're going to have an 85th anniversary informal open house. It will be from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time on Saturday, October 24th, and Sunday, October 25th. Located up at the railroad, and you can stop by either day. You can do a self-guided tour of the exterior. We'll have already got 3 or 4 of people who are going to come and help out and give guided tours of the interior as well, to you get a chance to see some of this in person. So again, 10 to 4 on the 24th Saturday and the 25th Sunday. Free, open to the public, no need to RSVP or anything. We'll just show up, and just wanted to mention that. So
Excellent.
Good evening, everybody. I have a question for you guys up there. This is Steve McCarthy here. When I was growing up, I lived by the Northern Railcar Corporation, Bill Gardner by Cudahy, and I got to tour the place all the time and they were refurbishing the cars. Well, I got to ride their switch engine a little bit, that W1, I think it was. I have pictures of me on it and that. So when we were going up past your guys' museum, or a couple of years ago, I saw that unit in there, and I took the pictures of the NRCC locomotive, the maroon one. And last February, when we were passing through there, I seen it in the CNW colors. I just wanted to ask, what's the story behind that, getting that from Gardner and stuff like that, old Northern Railcar Corporation switch engine?
That engine was was sold by Gardner to the Cambria mill, and it operated in Cambria, Wisconsin They literally wore the wheels off the locomotive. They wore them down to the point where chunks actually broke out of the tread of the locomotive, having it in the grain elevator there. And so the locomotive was due to be scrapped, and we found out about it. And being that we already had, a couple of SW1s on the property, we thought, just if nothing else, we could use it for parts. And so we acquired it and trucked it up here to Trigo. And at this point, we haven't restored it. We did put a different set of trucks. We had a spare set of trucks that had good wheels. So we did put a different set of trucks underneath it with good wheels. And so far, it's just sitting down in our future restoration project pile. There's nothing, terribly wrong with the locomotive. I mean, unfortunately, prior to our acquisition, a cut of grain cars got away while it was stored in Cambria before they disposed of it, and ran into the front of it. So it did some damage to the handrails and the steps and on the front of the locomotive. So right now it's just sitting down in the deadline, and we really love our SW1s. They're really just a fantastic locomotive, and so it's one that we can rebuild at some point. Originally the concept was just having the spare block for one of our others, but since that time we have purchased a couple of other spare blocks. So we have 3 SW1s in our fleet. We have a couple of spare blocks, a spare generator, and lots of other spare parts that we've bought. And then we also have, that SW600 that's going to, give its life to repower the Zephyr.
I do remember growing up, they had a couple of stack fires 2 different times on that unit when I was a teenager. I can't remember that, but I could see flames coming up from the house.
Oh my!
Oh yeah, that's very, very common with EMDs, especially if they're not worked real hard. And a lot of those little switchers like that, spent a lot of their time idling and builds up carbon in the stack. So it's a pretty common situation.
Greg, I'm going to thank you, Steve, for the question. Greg, I'm going to just share a picture here. Is this the locomotive in question?
Yes, correct. Yep.
And I took a picture of that in 2008 in Cambria. So it was actually running back then, as you see. Yep. Very good. All right. Thank you again for the question, Steve. Any other questions for Robert or for Greg? Robert?
Yeah, well, both. It was mentioned before that you don't have a maintenance building or anything. So how do you do all this work out in the cold and the snow and everything?
Well, I mentioned a little bit ago that that's one of those can't kind of things. A lot of the museum type organizations, well, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have a facility, we don't have a shop, we can't do this. The last 30 years, I've been rebuilding cars nearly every winter. We rebuild something. This time of the year, and right now, we are frantically working to get the windows put back into the Zephyr. I just, we got a sample of some new insulation product that I haven't used previously in today. And, we insulated about 20 feet of the walls in the Huckleberry Finn, and I placed the order for the rest of it. So over the next couple of weeks, all the windows will go in, insulation will go into the walls, and 480 volt power, transformers, circuit breaker panels, and yesterday we got in enough baseboard radiator to do half the train. So over the next 3-4 weeks, we'll get the entire train sealed up, we'll get it insulated, and we'll get some baseboard heat in there, and then we're off to the races for the winter. Strip and paint on all the ceilings, redoing the bathrooms, getting all the interior put together, all the walls done. So by springtime, all of the interior work will be done on the train, and then we can concentrate on the trucks and the rest of the exterior work. And that's what makes us, know that we can get this thing ready for service next year.
Real good. Thank you. Thanks.
One quick question. That 6-axle unit you had, what is that? Is that an SD35 or what is it? Or do you still have it?
We still have it, SD40-2.
Oh, it is.
Canadian built for the Algoma Central and then Wisconsin Central. And it was due to be scrapped by the Canadian National. It's one of those big railroad, kind of things. The number came up, so it's going out the door. Lucky for us, it had just been rebuilt 11 months prior to the day that they were going to send it out the door for scrap. And we were very fortunate to get it. So we did have a problem with it a couple of years back. It suffered some freeze damage in the after coolers, on 140 below winter evening. And unfortunately, we were running, we've at that point just ran water in the locomotives, and we had an onboard heating system, and we have developed a custom application. One of our radio guys developed a monitoring system, a cellular-based monitoring system that sends everybody, basically everybody on the railroad a text if they get cold. And so, here it is at 3 o'clock in the morning, and my cell phone goes off. I got a text, and the locomotive 6006, I'm cold, basically is what the text says. And it's 40 degrees below zero. And I spring out of bed, I pull my clothes on, throw my boots on, and head out, start my truck, and I'm going to drive from Spooner over to Hayward. And so I drove right past Springbrook, and I get over to Hayward, and the locomotive isn't in Hayward. I'm like, what the heck? We had put in 4 different wayside power plugs, so we could plug the locomotives in at 4 different locations. And I just wasn't aware that the crew finished up their day over in Springbrook, and they figured that they were going to have some cars out of there first thing in the morning. The logger was just about done loading them, but didn't finish, so they didn't take the engine back to Hayward. So I got to Hayward, and there's no locomotive. And then my phone rings, and it was the conductor. Well, he'd gotten the text, and he only lived a couple miles from the locomotive, and he knew where it was. And I'm like, where's the engine? He goes, oh, it's in Springbrook. Don't worry, I started it. And I'm like, oh my God, no, because the aftercooler sucks in so much cold air at that 40 degrees below zero, it instantly freezes before it can generate any heat out of the engine block. And so in that matter of minute, I mean, I was running up there to drain the engine. That's why I was running up there. And in that matter of a couple of minutes between the time he started it and the time he called me, he'd already frozen the headers on the front end of the engine and cracked them. And so it was out of service. We brought it down. We had to repair it. And that's when we, in that same time frame is when we acquired the first couple of our Jeep 35s. So the Jeep 35s have been handling the mill traffic real good, and we've just kind of, up to this point, kept the 6006, the SD40 back down in Trigo, and we use it for moving cars around and stuff. And it's really one of my favorite engines. I love that engine. It's fantastic.
Greg, you had a Alco owned by a private party in Trigo. Is that still there? And are you using that to shuffle cars around as well?
Nope. It's an Alco, and we don't know much about Alcos. When I started in this business, 35, 40 years ago, one of the first mechanical guys that I met and kind of trained under, he said, stay the hell away from them Alcos. He said, you know, you can't get parts. He goes, I know they're cheap, but you can't get parts for them. And he said, just stick with the EMDs. And so I learned on EMDs, and in my entire career, it's all been EMD. And so we've kind of stayed away from that. Now, had a guy, an opportunity and a true passion for the GBW, ex-GBW Alco. Had an opportunity to buy one because it was going to be retired and presumably scrapped. And he came up and said, hey, I really love this thing, but I got to have a place to put it. And I said, yeah, bring it on up, and we'll give it a home. But we're not going to run it. I mean, if it's operable, possibly for a photo, a photo weekend or something. You may see it in service up here, but you won't see it in day-to-day service. It's not something, if something happens to it, it's not something that we have a lot of knowledge or skill in fixing. And so we'll stick with our EMDs for that.
Right. Okay, good. Any other questions?
May I ask I hate to ask you in the middle of making everybody sit there for this, but do you just have an email address if I wanted to send you a note, Greg?
Yeah, you bet. It's manager
Written out?
Name manager at Spooner Train Ride, all lowercase, all run together, no spaces, no dashes, no nothing. SpoonerTrainRide.com.
Manager, MANAGER.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Can I ask what radio channel your freight crews use during switching operations?
The AAR channel is, let's see, 54 for them. And let's see, we also have 31 and 77. So those are our three assigned frequencies.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
I should point out that Dan Grudge-Lanik, the gentleman who just asked that question, is the compiler of a really fine radio frequency list. You can find it in the resources section on the Wisconsin Chapter NRHS site, and he does frequent updates to that, and it's a great compilation, not just covering Wisconsin but some nearby states as well. Hat tip to you, Dan, for doing that. And there you go. You all just saw the research involved in compiling that listing. Anything else for our guests?
Yes, Greg, I'm curious, what's that item on the counter behind you?
On the counter behind me. Somebody finally noticed that. That is the tail sign from the Mark Twain Zephyr. That is the original bust and the original tail sign from the Mark Twain Zephyr, which we have recently reacquired.
Oh, that's great. I thought it looked like Mark Twain, but I figured I better check. Thank you.
There you go.
Greg, can you bring that in the light to show us a little better?
Well, we can try. I don't know if you can see that. It is too heavy for me to just pick up and carry over. So I don't know if you can see it from where it's sitting.
Right. So yeah,
if people pin your video, they can see it a little bit closer, I think.
You're interested in, Mike, do you have time? Can I tell you a quick how we found out about that?
Sure.
Kind of the story with the medallion is we went down to Mount Pleasant 4 times this year to research the book, and I heard about 7 or 8 different stories of, is this real? Is it the replica? We heard that there were replicas made and this and that and all these stories. So we fleshed through all those for the book, and we found out that the original medallion what Greg has now is it went with the train to Mount Pleasant, and within a few months of going to Mount Pleasant, it disappeared off the train. The owner was not very happy, Ernie Hayes, the owner from 1962. So it disappeared. Guess folks had a conscience back then, and they ended up about 4 months after it being missing, they turned the medallion back in. It just reappeared in the middle of the night, and the old threshers in Mount Pleasant at the time was at the edge of town, which it's not much anymore as Mount Pleasant's grown. So what happened was he said, well, I'm not going to put the original medallion back on the train. So the owner hung it in his in-ground pool room. From 1962 until 1990, it was hanging in a swimming pool room. Ernie, the owner, passed. He never sold the original medallion, and he had a replica made to be put on the back of the train. So we found out what we had was a replica. And not only was it, we thought it was just a medallion, because if you come up and visit the railroad, it's the back panel with the medallion missing. So we thought that we were just looking for the medallion, the centerpiece of Mark Twain. When it turns out the whole thing currently on the train is a replica. It passed to Ernie's daughter, Ruth Ann, and then it passed to the grandson. And we discovered it about 3 weeks ago. It was down in his garage between Austin and San Antonio, Texas. And Hayes family just felt it, as we do at the Wisconsin Great Northern, it just belongs with the train. And we actually drove it back last week from Texas all the way about 1,700 miles, driving that back. And now it's back.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that, Robert. Anything else?
Right.
Well, I think now's a good time. Unless there's anything else, we'll probably just adjourn here. As has been our tradition in these Zoom meetings, we will leave the meeting room open for informal chit chat amongst anybody who cares to stick around. So keep that in mind. Again, October 20th is the next time we will be gathering together for the first of the Wisconsin chapter's it'll be our inaugural informal slideshow, Tuesday the 20th of October at 7:30 p.m. You guys will get information on that. Our meeting in November is Eric Hendrickson of CSX talking about their honor locomotives. So we've got a lot of neat stuff coming your way. With gratitude, I turn to Greg and to Robert for thanking you guys for your work and sharing with us your railroad. We appreciate the offer of the open house on the 24th and 25th of this month. I will endeavor to come up that way myself, and I see a lot of people giving thumbs ups and hand claps. I will do the same. Thank you again, gentlemen, for sharing tonight. And Greg, anything else to say? Anything else to say in your defense?
I guess just one final thought. Robert does have on the Mark Twain Zephyr website a place to sign up for that newsletter. We're going to send out a couple of newsletters a month giving you updates and photographs and stuff of the work being done on the train. So if that's something you're real interested in, go on over to marktwainzephyr.com and sign up. He's got the first edition ready to go out tomorrow. So if you want to see that very first edition of the newsletter, head on over to marktwainzephyr.com and get signed up, and then you'll get that first newsletter and get a couple newsletters a month throughout the next year, and you can watch the progress as it happens.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight.